Well, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome. I'm Stephanie Fisher with the Education and Training Department of Michigan Bankers Association. Delighted to have you on today. Thank you. We're so excited. Very important topic, relationship development, our new normal for now and going into 2021, and being effective with these virtual relationships is so important. We're delighted to welcome Jack Hubbard from St. Myers and Hubbard. He's a longtime friend of MBA and trainer, and you're in for a great hour, him sharing his expertise with you. So I want to quickly introduce him. So Jack Hubbard, if you do not know him, he is the chairman and chief experience officer at St. Myers and Hubbard. His humorous style and street savvy approach has taken him to almost all 50 states, training and serving as a presenter for many of the state banking associations and many within your bank as well. He returned in 2017 for his 32nd year as an award-winning faculty member at ABA's School of Bank Marketing and Management. He has since retired from the school. He has instructed at ABA's Stonier Graduate School of Banking for 17 years. And of course, a teacher at the Graduate School of Banking and our own MBA Perry School of Banking. He was recently named section leader of the new GSB Sales and Marketing School that launched in October of 2018. His content you can see all over LinkedIn, ABA Bank Marketing blog, the American Banker, the Financial Brand, RMA Journal, just to name a few. He is the co-author of the best-selling book Conversations with Prospects. He's very active on social media. He'll talk about that, his business banking network, his social selling for Bankers Group on LinkedIn, etc. So Jack brings a wealth of knowledge. He also serves on the board of directors of St. Charles Bank and Trust, a billion-dollar community affiliate of Wintrust Financial in Illinois, and he's the chairman of the bank's Customer Experience Committee. So we're so delighted to have you, Jack. Welcome.
Well, thank you, Stacey. Absolutely fabulous to see you back again after a couple of weeks. I know we had Tia and a couple of Nicole and a couple of folks that were in our recent training class. And I was telling somebody yesterday up in Minnesota, Kim Phillipson up in Minnesota, how when we got together in October, it was your first training session back in your facility, and how we both kind of were washing down things and making sure everything was disinfected. So we had a lot of fun. So thank you for this great opportunity to enhance our partnership with Michigan Bankers and certainly our friends up in Michigan. I've been almost everywhere up in the state, from the Upper Peninsula over to the Thumb, to Detroit, and over to Grand Rapids, and pretty much everywhere in between. So it's great to be back with you all, talking about really my second favorite subject in 2020. My first is always LinkedIn, but my favorite subject, my second favorite subject, is this topic that we're going to discuss and that we're going to be dealing with, I think, for a while. I think there's a lot of mistakes and miscalculations that bankers are making around remote selling. And we're going to talk about some of those today, but certainly one of them is, even if you're in an area, a town, if your bank has a philosophy of wanting to get out and see people face to face, I think that's terrific. The challenge, of course, is that many times your customer doesn't want to see you. So you might be in the office and want to go out and make some sales calls face to face, but two-dimensional is pretty well where we're going to be at, I think, for a while. And we need, as community bankers, to skill up our people so that, in fact, they can do a better job. In fact, in a recent McKinsey study, business owners reported at an 80% level that they, in 2021 and perhaps beyond, would be in their home offices as much as they are in their business offices. So we need to be able to do this, and we're gonna talk about how to get that done. So one thing that we need to think about is 2020, and since this week starts the Masters, I thought this might be a kind of an interesting way to get our program off and running. We certainly have all been there. We've almost gotten to the ball in the hole, and all of a sudden it starts to roll back. And that is indeed 2020 in spades. Fortunately, it's going to end, but 2021 will present its own challenges, and that's some of the things that we certainly want to talk about today. So one of the things that I would suggest to you, if you wish, we just completed a pretty significant two-part white paper on virtual selling, selling remotely for bankers. If you would like to have a copy of one or both of those sections, I would assume you'd want both, just reach out to me via email, message me on LinkedIn, and I'm very, very happy to oblige that and provide you with the value that you came for today. So before we start talking about remote relationship development, we need to really set a context. And those of you that have heard me ever before, or those of you that have read anything about me, heard me at GSB, know how big I am on the 5 C's of relationship development. So conversations are really important, and they can happen extremely effectively, as you're going to see on the small screen today. Curiosity is critical. Getting that buyer to want more, and that is doable here in this pandemic situation. I think too often bankers have become hunkered down and not allowed the buyer to be curious, not allowed the buyer to see what they're all about, because we've hunkered down and we haven't really reached out to our clients, which I think is a huge, huge mistake. The third thing is collaboration. And one of the things we're going to talk about today is what happens when a partner joins. We have some bankers from the same bank, M-Bank represented up in the Upper Peninsula. We have some associate members here who are non-bankers, who are all probably in their remote offices, and they would consider themselves partners with each other. What happens when a partner joins a virtual conversation? Well, that collaboration can happen and it can be very effective, but we have to be very, very careful. And then what about customization? How do I make sure that I tailor things that are for that particular buyer? And we'll give you a couple of very practical examples on that. And the last thing, of course, is connectivity. How can I connect, not only on LinkedIn, but how can I connect on that little green dot that's facing me in my computer, or if you have a mobile camera, same. Connectivity can be done very effectively in remote situations, and we'll certainly talk about that today. Now, before I move on, one of the things I always like to let people know is that the chat function is available for you to ask questions, make comments, whatever the case might be, and we're happy to oblige if there is indeed a question. So let's move on. What is virtual relationship development? Well, it's a multifaceted strategy that banks have to be incredibly intentional about. This is not just taking your laptop from the bank to your home, opening it up and having some sales calls. This is an intentional process that involves 3 basic things. Number 1, there is an incredibly important technical side to this. Now, I checked, and none of you here today are IT professionals, but you do have the need to become technically proficient in whatever software your organization provides. I was on a call this morning with a banker, and one of the things the banker said is, you know, the younger people in our bank are doing really well with this, but it's really hard to teach an old dog new tricks. Let me tell you something. I'm 70 years old. For the last 21 years, I have had the great privilege of owning a training company where our trainers have been out somewhere 300 to 500 days a year on the road. Myself, I've spent 47 weeks a year on the road for the last 33 years, and I've really enjoyed it a lot. But we have to face a new reality, and that reality is that we have to pursue or perish. And so one of the things we decided to do was to take all of our face-to-face stuff and migrate it over to a couple of different platforms. We are not young people. We are veterans, all of us. And so what we had to do is, despite our age, take the bull by the horns and make it happen. And that's really true for your commercial bankers, branch managers, private bankers, mortgage bankers, whatever it might be. Regardless of their age, it is important to skill up during these times. And technically, we need to be better at this. Certainly the second thing is how to have a great conversation. And you can virtually. And we'll talk about some ideas around that as well. This never happens, will never happen, cannot happen. It won't sustain itself unless there is a great approach to leadership. And we'll end with that. So let's start with some technical considerations. There are a lot of systems out there. I can tell you Microsoft Teams is improving a lot, and a lot of people are migrating over to Teams because it has a lot of bells and whistles. WebEx, we've certainly seen that. If you go down to the lower end, there's Skype and Blue Jeans. We use Blue Jeans at Graduate School of Banking. And then, of course, there's Zoom that everybody knows about. And it's kind of like the old Xerox, isn't it? When you wanted to go make a copy at the bank, you would say, could you Xerox this for me, regardless of the kind of copy machine you have. And when we're on a call like this, whether it's a webinar or a sales call, we always call it a Zoom meeting, even though we may use a different kind of software. So there's a lot of different softwares out there. The number one thing is to make it yours. But even before that, it's really important to know what you can and cannot do with your software. There are certain things that banks require or not require, or you can or cannot do. And we'll talk a little bit about some of those today. So know your software and know what you can do. If you use any quality software, one thing to consider strongly under your technical considerations is when you are inviting someone to come on to a Zoom meeting, customize that waiting room, because when they're in there, they will see their name. Oh, Tia is there, or Terry is there, or Kim is there. And when Kim comes into the room, it's welcome, Kim, looking forward to our conversation. That's a little subtlety that can be very important when you start the process. Now, one of the things you have to do is remember that because we're having multiple Zoom meetings in a day, on Monday I had 6, we have to continue to customize that waiting room. The more you do it, the more you'll remember. It's muscle memory, and it's much, much easier to do. Another thing, and again, within policy, it is absolutely vital, we're doing it today, to record your meetings. It's important to be able to do that, to be able to go back. And we're going to talk about that in the life of another person and why it's so important for that person to know that you've recorded your meetings. We'll talk about that down the road. Every software allows you to do something with a whiteboard or annotation. And too often bankers have pretty well shied away from that because either A, they don't know how to get to it, or B, worse, they know how to get to it, but they don't know how to use it very effectively. What I would suggest to you as bankers is in team meetings and one-on-ones and working with a colleague, just jump on a Zoom meeting with a colleague and practice your whiteboard. There was a book written in 2013 called Whiteboard Selling. It was a very popular book, and it basically says, I don't care if you draw stick figures. If you can engage the buyer, because about 75% of us in America are visual learners, if you can engage the buyer through the whiteboard, you'll avoid the virtual hammock, which is really deadly for sales conversations. And then what about that seamless switching? Your ability to be able to move from deck to deck or software to software becomes really important. On the Mac, which I'm relatively proficient at, I guess, on the Mac, it's Command Tab. So you hit Command Tab, and now you can change out. So now I'm into my Chrome. If I Command Tab back, I'm right back into my PowerPoint. That doesn't happen unless you practice it. So that seamless switching makes you look much more technologically savvy. And then what about lights, camera, and sound? Ring light, Loom Cube, not terribly expensive. Put behind you as best as you possibly can. I can't do this because I'm right up against my wall here, but putting the light above you so that it shines down on you instead of behind you or off to the side becomes really important. Ring lights, Loom Cubes. They run between $50 and $80. They're not terribly expensive, but the price of darkness on the screen can really be costly to you as a bank. The camera. When I did my program for Stephanie a couple of weeks ago, one of the things I required the bankers to do, certainly not today, is to have them be on camera. I want to see them. And there's this debate going back and forth. How do I get my buyer to go on camera when they're shy about that? Well, first of all, understand that they're becoming less shy as they get more experience at this. And number two, set expectations. When you send the invitation, when you send a follow-up email, set the expectation that you're going to be on the camera, and typically your buyers are on the camera as well. You can't require it, but it's really important to set that expectations as much as you possibly can. The other thing that's very, very important to consider, if you are in a work from home permanence, or if your bank has said, look, you're in business development, you don't need to come to the office a lot, let's set you up for a home office, consider getting multiple screens. I have 2 screens in front of me and a laptop off to my right. That allows me to have a lot of flexibility. I can see you on one screen, I can see my PowerPoint on another screen, I can see where I am on time on a third screen. When you have that limited to one screen, you really are constricted as to what to do. And I can tell you this, as a veteran of sales for many, many, many years, and just working on a one laptop setup for a while, I can tell you I would never go back to just a single screen. Multiple screens is where it's at. The other thing to consider from a technical perspective is who else is at home. Are your kids working, going to school from home? Are they playing Fortnite in the afternoon when they're not going to school? What about your spouse? Are they doing Zoom meetings as well? So knowing where in the house your best bet is so that you won't freeze up or get knocked off is really important. And to do that, run speed tests, speedtest.net. Very simple to do, it's free, and you can go from room to room, area to area, and you can find out the ingoing and outgoing megabits. It's about as much as I know about a megabit, that will allow you to have the bandwidth to stay on. The other thing we're seeing is coordination is really important here. Coordinating with your spouse as to when they're doing their meetings, because you don't want to both potentially be on at once. My daughter and son-in-law moved back home from New York. He's the photo science editor of the New York Times, and she's the chief people officer for a company in New York. And they're both virtual now. And they moved back home and bought a home here in the western suburbs. But before they moved, the 3 of us were on conference calls constantly. So we had to coordinate and make sure we continued to run speed tests. Because the other thing you don't consider is that in your subdivision or in your neighborhood, you are not the only one that's using Comcast or Xfinity or AT&T or whoever you use. Everybody that's using it continues to scrunch the bandwidth. And so it's important to know when during the day do I have my best opportunities, and when during the day is it more challenging. That will allow you to strategically set some appointments so that you don't get knocked off or the buyer doesn't. The last thing from a technical perspective is really a human perspective. I'm big on FOLO, first on, last off. So Stephanie we're on here 30 minutes before just to make sure everything worked. And I'm going to be the last one off other than Stephanie. She and I will be the last one off to make sure that we debrief and make sure everything went okay. Too often what I've seen when I'm on joint calls with bankers on Zoom calls is that they click leave the meeting right in the middle when the buyer was saying something. So make sure the buyer is gone and then do your follow. Workplace considerations. As I mentioned last Monday, I was on 6 Zoom calls. I became a Zoombie, and we are becoming a society of Zoombies. We're more proficient at it, and our performance levels have certainly gone up since March. The bottom line is, if you are running too many Zoom meetings, your eyes are going to fade slowly in the West. You just can't help it. And if you're running them back to back to back, be real careful about that. We recommend running meetings about 30 minutes apart. Get up, stretch, have a cup of coffee and water, walk the dog, whatever the case might be, so that you can get proficient, get energized, get re-energized and ready for that next meeting. Owls and larks. My children are, oh, look at that, somebody's logging in. My children are owls, night owls. they work late in the evening. They work best when it's late in the evening. I'm a lark. I get up with my dog at 2:45 every morning. She has breakfast and goes back to bed, and I stay up. And I'm usually pretty good until about 2 o'clock in the afternoon. And I can tell you right after this, I'm probably going to take a nap. The bottom line is, when are you best? Because when you are best, you want to make sure that indeed that's when you make your calls. Always do your external calls first. Managers on this call, I think we have a CEO on this call, make sure that you're allowing your bankers to make their sales calls first when they're freshest, and then do your sales meetings a little bit later. They may not be as energized for you, but you'd rather have that than not being as energized for their clients. Do some routines. Make sure you do routines. Get yourself into a routine. And a routine could be, in mid-morning, I'm getting up, taking a walk. At 11:30, I'm going to have lunch. I'm going to take a break in the afternoon, and just for 30 minutes, I'm going to chill, or I'm going to read, or do something to get away from the screen and get away from the computer. Establish yourself in a routine. Those people that do tend to be a lot more effective. What about dress? There are some banks who do have a dress code, and there are others who say, just make sure you look professional in a business casual setting. But I have had other banks who have allowed their bankers to wear hats as long as they have a logo from the bank, or golf shirts, or sweatshirts, or sweaters, or shirts that have the bank logo on it. I think that's absolutely terrific. In the camera position, don't have too much space here between you and your head and the top of the screen. Make sure you're centered on it. Make sure you're not too close. We call it zoom face, or too far away. All those things become really important, and make sure you're centered on the screen. Now, what about that background? This is my office. This is not a virtual background. It's my office. So I tend to use it. Virtual backgrounds are fine. I think they're going away and are becoming a little out of style. But one of the things you can kind of consider is, what about the backgrounds of other people? See, here are 4 people that already you're not even looking at them. You're evaluating their background. And we do that all the time. Now, what's really important is not what we do. It's more important as to what your buyer is doing. They're looking at your background and saying, what is this banker all about? You're looking at their background and saying the same exact thing. So we need to be very, very careful. You want to do your Zoom meetings in the kitchen because it's the best light? Great. Make sure the dishes are clean and put away. You want to do it in a spare bedroom? That's fine. Avoid pointing to the bed. Those little things become very, very important. Last couple of things on the workplace considerations. Make sure you turn off your notifications. Turning off your notifications is absolutely critical here. I'll give you an example. So I was on a call with a banker, joint call, and bankers on the call with a plastics company and a plumbing supply company. And up pops a notification that his next meeting was going to be with a competing plumbing supply company. There's no way to take it away. It's there. You're going to see it. And if you record the meeting and send it to the client or prospect, that's again, they're going to see it again. So turn off all of your notifications so that people don't see you have a dentist appointment in a couple of hours. A couple of other things. I think that community banks have a tremendous opportunity here. Collaborating with your marketing department, you could create a virtual conference room. Some people call it a Zoom room, where you could set this up with a camera and a video and some really neat backgrounds. Think of it this way. One of our clients is doing this. So let's say you're going to call out a pediatrician and you're going to do a Zoom meeting with them, or an orthopedic surgeon, or a veterinarian, or someone in that particular profession. What one bank does, they have 4 quotes that are behind the banker, and they're all medical related quotes. They're framed and big enough so that the buyer can see them. What happens 30 minutes later if the banker is going on a call with a manufacturing company? 4 manufacturing quotes. So you can change out the room and customize it based on the kind of calls that you're doing. I believe that's going to be a significant trend in 2021. So there's a lot to consider here. It's not all that difficult, but it does take some help from your IT department, understanding what you can and cannot do from your compliance department. And if you're a senior manager on here, giving your people the resources to be able to do their job effectively on the small screen. That is a small investment to make when it comes to making business development calls. So we're on the call. Customize everything. Customize the invitation, the follow-up, and make sure you do an agenda that you can send out. When they come into the room, already be sharing your screen. And how about this? What if I come into the room and I'm your buyer, and what happens if Thumb National Bank or United Bank or M Bank is up on the screen? If I'm from if I'm buying from M Bank's buying from me, if I put M Bank up on the screen, what happens if you put my website up? What happens if you put my LinkedIn homepage up? That shows that you are ready for me and that you have customized this. The other thing is, on the camera, you can tell the communication style of the buyer somewhat. Are they looking at the camera? Do they look down? Do they seem to have a lot of self-confidence? Are they gregarious and outgoing? Are they a little more quiet? All those things become really important, because as you ask your questions, what you're going to want to do is ask them in the social style that you see on the screen. That's really important. What about share of heart? Those of you that know anything about me know how big I am on share of heart options. Share of heart could mean hobbies, interests, backgrounds, passions, favorite food, favorite flower, where they went to college, all those kinds of things. In a 3D environment, when you walk into someone's office, you can see the golf clubs, the diploma from Michigan, Michigan State, Central Michigan, Eastern Michigan, Western Michigan, and some of the other, Hope College. I've covered a lot of them in Michigan. But in the two-dimensional world, many times you can't see that. And if you do, and if it's a buyer that you're not familiar with, or it's the first time on the call, maybe you don't talk about that very much. You don't talk about the pictures on the credenza. Just let it alone. If the buyer says, I was just out walking my dog and there's a picture of their dog, absolutely talk about it. But don't use that as a crutch to start the call. We're finding that there's a lot less rapport established early on. Doesn't mean you can't do some, but you got to be very, very careful about doing too much. And truthfully, this is a guided conversation. What you're trying to do in a discovery conversation is to establish your credibility and to make sure you understand the problem. You know, as Stephanie kindly pointed out, I'm a proud member of a bank, community bank board. I was doing a program for our bank recently, and one of the bankers said, I've never bought into this remote selling thing. I just can't ask the right questions. I can't do it. I can't wait for it to go away. And I don't think it's a zero-sum game. I think that there are going to be times when you're going to do early cycle calls remotely, and you're going to do late cycle calls in person. You're never going to lend money to a buyer for a piece of real estate unless you view it. You're never going to put an equipment down as collateral if you don't see it. So all that, it's not a zero-sum game. I don't think you either do it all or don't do it all. I think the real key here is that you do it the right time, the right way. So what is the right way? Well, we believe you don't have to lose a lot of eye contact with the screen in order to be able to ask a lot of questions. Think of it this way. If you watch the news tonight and you look at a newscaster and they are looking down at their copy and not making eye contact with the camera, they obviously haven't done very well as a newscaster. They need a little bit of extra practice. You as a banker need to ask the right questions, but where you put those questions is really important. So for questions and comments, one of the things we might suggest is turkey feathering. This is a very easy to establish concept, and it just involves a bunch of Post-it notes and a little bit of time right before the call. So what kinds of questions are you going to ask? Well, those of you that were with me a couple of weeks ago, and those of you that are familiar with any kind of need defining, understand that there are BNG questions. Where have you been? Where are you now? Where are you going? You want to make sure you ask several good questions on a first call. We call it the first call 6. You want to ask some really good, insightful questions. And you want to ask a 97% question toward the end. Did we miss anything? Well, while we haven't put any questions on here, I think you get the concept. What if you wrote the B questions on the blue Post-it notes, and not full questions, but just bullet points? What if you wrote some additional B and G questions focused on a particular priority in the yellow Post-it notes? The orange Post-it notes could be your first call 6, and the green ones can be your insight questions. And the pink Post-it note down at the right can remind you to do certain things. Ask the 97% question, summarize, redirect. It can all be done right here. Now you need to pre-board these before you do the conversation, and you need to do it relatively soon before you do that. Because if you don't, the Post-it notes won't stick. They'll stick for a while, but they won't stick for the entire time. One other thing, if you choose to do Post-it notes, don't reach over and pull it off, because the buyer will be able to see that you're doing it. Just leave them there. If they fall off, you're going to be fine. So turkey feathering is a great way to ask remote questions without losing eye contact with the camera. Now, what about note bites? Note bites are a great way to take notes on virtual calls. You don't have to lose a lot of eye contact. Put your notepad to your writing side and just write some notes and note bites. Just write a few snippets, not sentences, of key priorities that you're hearing. Now remember, you don't have to take notes at all if you're recording the call. You can go right back and listen to the issues and the priorities right after the call, because all software will email you the conversation that you've recorded. So if you choose to not write notes and you choose to record the call, you're in fabulous shape. That will allow you to really listen, know the value, show the value. So we're toward the end of the conversation. Let's say I'm on a call with a dentist, and I say, Dr. Schmidlap, I've done a little homework, and I wanted to share with you a leave behind that I'm going to email you after our call. This has to do with the COVID-related issues around dentistry. I got this from the American Dental Association. And as you notice, Dr. Schmidlap, there's several things around emergency planning that this article suggests. Now, in reading the article, Dr. Schmidlap, I found 5 things that are really important around emergency planning, and here they are. 1, 2, 3, 4. Now, Dr. Schmidlap, I will be happy to email this after this, but thoughts on this? Are these some things that you've done at your dental practice to help you and your patients be safe? Comment, comment, comment. So at the end, you can, if you know the value, you can show the value. Now, you notice I didn't put anything up there about the bank. It's not about the bank, it's about the buyer. But that buyer has an option. They can go with you, they can see you again, or they don't have to. So what I would suggest is, at the end of your virtual conversation, don't go without the mo. Don't leave the conversation without at least trying to get a second appointment. That's really, really important. Don't go without the mo. The next step is, Dr. Schmidlap, I'd like to schedule another meeting. The next step is, I'd like to get your financials. The next step is, etc. Know what that is. And of course, those of you that were with me a couple of weeks ago, those of you that have been trained by me, those of you that have gone through any sales training, know that maximum and minimum goals on calls are really, really important. And the last thing is, if a partner joins, if you've got a treasury management partner, a president, your manager, a mortgage banker, this is not a category 1 hurricane. This is category 5. This is a real big deal. So there are some really important things. And again, if you email me or send me a message on LinkedIn, I'm really happy to send you our white paper that describes in pretty good detail some of the key things you need to be doing with a partner. So we have a question up here. So let me see what the question is. That's great. Thank you, Nicole. So that's an important conversation consideration. that partner conversation is really critical. So as I mentioned to you before, what's really important here is a leadership perspective. This will never happen without good leadership. The number one challenge that bankers are having, people are having, working remotely, is loneliness. And so managers too often, what they'll say is, I want my people to be productive, I want to leave them alone. It's not just walking down the hall and seeing anyone anymore. It's really important to engage with your people. Now, that doesn't mean micromanagement, but it does mean your ability to get on Zoom calls with them, either one-on-one or one-on-many, and make sure that they are where they need to be from a psyche perspective, from a safety perspective. Empathetic managers are really important these days. We got to have our people hit their numbers and at least try. I don't doubt that. But being empathetic for the long run is really critical. So how do we do that? Well, we call it the performance pyramid. And that basically says, if I'm a manager, what I need to be thinking about are the outcomes that I seek, but I get there through the activities that I want my bankers to do. Remote meetings, sending something of value, connecting with people on LinkedIn. All those things are really important. But what's really critical, and when we wrote our brand new video-based series, Remote Relationship Development, one of the things that we really focused on was the behaviors. Those behaviors that bankers need to be doing when they're trying to be technically proficient, when they're trying to assess the social style, when they're trying to ask the right questions, when they're engaging with a partner, when they don't go without the mode. All those things are behaviors that a banker controls. And one of the things a leader needs to be doing is knowing what they're observing, observe them, and then follow up with a coaching intervention. So let's talk about some of the things that you can do remotely as a manager. Well, first of all, you could do team meetings. And these meetings need to be get to go versus have to go. I've had a lot of bankers say, you know, we used to do our meetings on Tuesday at 10:30 every week for 38 years. We've had to change that because of scheduling, because of whatever the case might be. So whatever days your meetings are, make sure they're done after your bankers have made their calls or conversations for the day. And make sure as a manager that your bankers get to look forward to coming to the meeting because you're going to add something of value to them versus simply making this a report meeting and going around the room and playing liar's poker. Check-ins are really important. And I talked to a manager very recently who said they have had better check-ins and one-on-ones with their people since the pandemic because A, their people are looking forward to seeing someone outside their home, and B, that one-on-one time can assure the manager that the banker is engaged because they require them to be on camera. The calls used to be made on the telephone, and the bank manager never knew if the banker was multitasking, which 85% of us do on Zoom calls. Now the manager and the regional manager can see each other, and that regional manager knows if that banker is engaged. Let's talk about observations. Before, we talked about recording the conversations. It's absolutely critical. But now what happens when a banker can send it to their manager? Well, what happens is the manager, unlike in real life, in the normal, they can actually be on every joint call with their banker. All the banker has to do is forward the recording and the manager can listen to it. Now, here's what I've got a lot of my managers doing. Listening to the calls, but listening for the priority improvement needs that their banker has. Is their banker not looking very intently at the camera? Did their banker not ask great questions? Did their banker not say the next step is? Did their banker not know how to do Command Tab and change the screen view so they could show something of value? What is that one isolated behavior that the manager can improve? The manager now can see what the improvement opportunities are right with the banker on the screen. So the banker gets off the call, the manager jumps on another Zoom call, and up the banker pops. Now we can see your call and your conversation together. That is incredibly powerful because it leads to better coaching, not only skills coaching and results coaching, but behavioral coaching that's really important. We're community bankers. And one of the reasons that some of you went from a large bank to a community bank is that you didn't want tick marks. Now, I want you to be clear. I have never said how many of any of these you do. I think that's really up to you and the bank's policies and your culture. What's really important, however, is that when you do them effectively, and also you connect them one over another. We call this the performance chain. This allows a manager to take that team meeting topic that they did and that they observed within their bankers, and it allows them to connect it back to one-on-ones and back to coaching. The manager is a really critical part of this overall process. You can sustain a culture in a virtual environment, not a sales culture, a performance culture. And when you do that, the winner of this race is the customer. They don't become a victim. So that's remote relationship development. As I mentioned, we've developed an 8-part video series around it. And if anybody needs information about that, we're very, very happy to provide that. You can do this. I've just taken out some of the best practices that we gleaned from our 1,800 hours of research over the spring and summer to bring this program to life. And it's not difficult, but it does require discipline. And so for those of you that are managers on here, get some resources for your people. If you're a banker and you're a producer on here, take some responsibility. If you have Zoom, Microsoft Teams, and you don't know how to use it, go to Amazon and buy Microsoft Teams for Dummies, or go to Microsoft Teams website or YouTube, and you'll be able to quickly figure out how to do this. This is not rocket science, but it is something that you do need a discipline around. So very recently, I was talking to a bank training manager, and I asked the question, when do you anticipate your bankers to be back in the classroom again? And the bank training manager laughed and looked at me and said, I think it'll be July or August of 2021. Here's the problem. We certainly want our people to be safe, but we also want to make sure that as we're training our people, we can train them effectively. So what a lot of banks have gone to is what we call VILT, Virtual Instructor-Led Training. And I want to use some of the rest of our time together to be able to talk about VILT and some of the things that your bank should probably consider as you move forward with this. There's 3 basic things: the technical aspect of it, the experience aspect of it, the experience of the learner, and the leadership aspect of it, all of which are very, very important. So from a technical perspective, your main partner here is security, IT, compliance, risk, those kinds of people. Making sure that you have a software that's compatible, that has the features that you need, and has the security that you want. Do you have this on a learning management system? That's a term that's not familiar to perhaps some of you, but for those of you in training or in leadership, you know that an LMS becomes almost non-negotiable regardless of size. There are some really good ones out there, and there are some challenging ones out there. Some are very inexpensive, and you get what you pay for. Others are a little more moderately priced and have a lot of bells and whistles. So understanding your software and your LMS and what you can do becomes very, very important. From a training partner perspective, understand this, that if you have materials that you have created for a classroom, differently, it's really, really important. And from a training perspective, if you can stand when you're facilitating these, that's really an important thing for you to be able to do. We have a producer on with us. This does create some additional expense for the bank to have a second person on there, but it's really important for you to be able to have someone, in case something goes south on you, to be able to either entertain the folks in training, explain what's going on, or behind the scenes, if Kathy is having difficulty getting on, she can go to her producer and the producer can help. And if I'm the trainer, I can continue to look at these things and continue to train without worrying about helping Kathy because I know somebody will. If you're a learner in here, turn apps off and turn camera on. You need to be held accountable to participate. And one of the things I did up in Michigan is a very important thing to do when I was up with Stephanie and team, because we had some people in the classroom and some people virtually. Call their name. First of all, make sure that they're held accountable to be on the camera, and then call their name. Because if you don't, they may fall into the virtual hammock, but calling their name keeps them ready. Now, what's that experience like? Get your energy ready. This is a tiring experience. If you're going to run a CSR class that you have run in a one-day format, well, that's several hours of training. So you're going to want to chunk these into a maximum of 90-minute chunks, and you're going to want to schedule it the same time, the same day for consecutive weeks. That way, everybody has it on their schedule, and everybody is well aware that they need to be ready in a particular kind of situation. Engaging people simply means using breakouts, using chats, using polls. And I was told by a bank training manager today, and the first time I was very engaged with this, is Jack, don't talk for any more than 5 minutes. This is hard on a webinar. But when you're in a virtual classroom, talk for 5 minutes and then get them into an exercise, a breakout room, a chat, a something to break up the monotony. Because if you don't, if you try to lecture for 90 minutes, it absolutely won't work. Slides. You can't read the slides and listen to the instructor at the same time. So what you have to do is to put very few words on the slide, not long sentences, but sound bites. And you can refer to the slide, but you want to be able to know what words are on the slide and be able to interpret it for your buyers. Lots of stories, lots of success practices. Smile. When I say don't rock the boat, if you're sitting, don't do chair dancing. That's really a very important thing. And then make sure that you are lighted well, very important. And what holds the sessions together are activities. We find that when a banker is held accountable by their manager to do an in-between session activity and the manager requires the banker to show it to them, that's where it's going to be successful. From a management perspective, communication is absolutely critical. Letting people know why they're going to class, what's important to them, why it's important to the bank, why it's important to their career, and certainly to the customer is absolutely critical. Articulating that is really, really important. We find that managers that actually attend the sessions are actually getting better engagement and better results. That doesn't mean you have to attend every session or be on every single minute, but it is important for the manager to pop back and forth to make sure that they let people know that they're engaged, and participation becomes really, really important. That the manager also in their in-between sessions is talking to their bankers about 3 really important things: outcomes, activities, and behavioral successes. So we're about to wrap this up, and I wanted to talk about 2 other really important concepts here. We did a study, and we found that only 4% of community banks, 4%, actually had an integrated, ongoing commercial onboarding process. That is, when a brand new client comes to your bank, they've never done business with you before, for that first year of the relationship, what are you doing to make sure to mitigate buyer's remorse, to maximize cross-solving, and to make sure that the client experience is rich and full? It can be done on the virtual screen. We call it TeamBoarding. And a couple of our clients have started to embrace this, and it's really working out very well. This is called a 1-6-3-1 process. Here's how this works. 1 week after the new buyer starts with your organization, 1 week, the banker schedules a Zoom meeting with the buyer and with their team. Now, the buyer knows that they're going to be getting this invitation because during the loan closing or deposit opening, the RM, the resource manager, actually oriented the buyer to the bank and how they do business and got the buyer's buy-in for this this next phone call. So 1 week into the relationship, up pops the team. Could be a loan assistant, a branch manager, a treasury management partner, the leader, the sales manager, a mortgage banker, could be others. And that RM, that resource manager, leads the charge by introducing all the bankers and making sure that they have a little 2-minute soundbite that they can use to introduce themselves, to establish their credibility, and to make sure that the buyer knows that they're available at any particular time. The banker also can say, what's your experience been in the first week with our relationship? So you can mitigate anything that's a challenge right away. This can be done really effectively on the small screen. But again, when you've got all these partners on, there needs to be some coordination. Now, the good news here is you're not going to team board 200 new clients every week. This is not going to be that much of a deal. Let's say you have 20 brand new clients that earn the right to have team boarding or want it. That's not a lot of team boarding here. And once you do this a couple of times, it becomes pretty easy to do. 6 weeks into the relationship, the loan assistant schedules a meeting, and the loan assistant and the buyer, and perhaps someone else on their team, answers. The loan assistant answers questions about the statement. How was your statement? And then they ask the question. And the question, and this is a bonus for those of you that joined today, the question that the loan assistant asks is very simple. What initiatives might be on your plate, Mr. Johnson, over the next 3 to 6 months, and how can our bank be a partner in your success? When the loan assistant asks that question, they don't need to know anything about any products. All the buyer needs to know is that the loan assistant cares. And if there's something going on, the buyer can articulate it and the loan assistant can refer it over to the resource manager. 90 days into the relationship, the leader, the sales manager, regional manager, bank president, whoever it is, gets on a Zoom call with the buyer to gauge cross-solving opportunities. Can we solve more problems? And gauges the experience level that the buyer has had with the bank to this point. 1 year, the relationship of the relationship, the marketing department puts together a blind embossed anniversary card that the regional manager, this head of the division, or the bank president sends a personal note with their business card. Congratulations, it's your 1 year anniversary. Thanks for doing business with us. 1-6-3-1. It's easy, it's challenging, and remember, this is not at all a campaign. This is a work style change. A lot of people say, how can I do that with this without a CRM? Well, you can do it, but it's a challenge because your CRM actually helps you from a backbeat perspective. You can also do it through Outlook and other Google calendars and other kinds of things as well. It doesn't have to be that sophisticated, but it does have to be done, and it has to be done effectively. And I can tell you that the bankers that have started down this path have generated a significant number of referrals and some really goodwill in the community. Last thing, those of you that have had any training with me at all or have listened today, you've heard a term called resource manager. I am not big on relationship management. I think that's a more reactive approach. Now, that's not to say if you're a relationship manager, you are bad. I believe, however, the buyer wants something more. I think they want a resource. And as we go into 2021, one of the things that we need to be thinking about is how can I, as a resource manager, make sure that my buyers are comfortable with our partnership. I was talking to a very large bank yesterday, and one of their strategies is fortify their borders. In other words, make sure their current clients don't leave. That's one important facet of a resource manager, to be proactive and not reactive. If there is something to do, if there is a way to help, you want to be that go-to banker. You want to have mind share. And what do? Well, they send out white papers and leads and articles and different kinds of things that can help the buyer understand that they indeed are the go-to banker. Now, where do they get it? Vertical IQ. There's a company called RelPro, outstanding. Smartbrief.com is free. Feedly.com is free. LinkedIn, millions of articles out there. So there is not a dearth of opportunities here to find articles. The articles are available and there. The problem is the backbeat of it all. So here's what one bank did. They call it 3 before 8. It's a really simple process. Every morning before 8 a.m., the banker finds articles to send to 3 different constituencies: prospects, clients, and centers of influence. Now, it could be 3 prospects on Tuesday. It could be 2 clients at a COI on Wednesday. But every day, 5 days a week, this bank in North Carolina has disciplined itself over the years to do 3 before 8. They're finding the articles in the places that I mentioned. But what's really important here is they send those articles to arrive before 8 a.m. And that simply means that the buyer finds their value add on the top of the stack, not the bottom. Now, to become a resource manager, some call it trusted advisor, what you really need to do is to forget it, set it and forget it. If the buyer sends something back and says, thank you, great. But that's not a time for you to reach back out and say, do you want to buy something from me? If the buyer says nothing, that's fine too. You need to do this because it's the right thing to do. Well, Stephanie has once again honored me by allowing me to share an hour of time with my favorite state in the union, Michigan. And I, as I say, I've been throughout the state in winter, in summer, played golf up there. I almost hit a deer up there. So I really enjoy working with Michigan Bankers Association. And Stephanie, I think we got a couple more minutes if people have questions, but we want to make sure that we end on time. So if anybody has any questions, please throw them in the chat or throw your camera on and show yourself and ask the question.
Thanks, Jack.
Any thoughts, questions?
Can ask them verbally. And we are recording this. I heard from a couple people that were not able to jump on. And there's Shelly. Hi, Shelly.
Hi, Shelly. Your mute button is on.
Hello.
There we go.
You have a question?
I had a quick question. I missed it with interruptions, but what does the MO stand for?
Don't go without the mo. Don't go without momentum.
Momentum.
You've had good momentum going into this call. You've had a good call. Don't leave without trying to get a second appointment.
Thank you.
Great question. Well, people know how to get a hold of me. We do have that 2-part white paper, so please feel free to reach out and get it. Happy to do it. And Stephanie, I probably won't see you, so have a wonderful holiday season. And we, no doubt, Lord willing, will be back together in 2021 up in Lansing. So thanks again.
Looking forward to it. Thank you. Happy holidays. Thank you all.
Bye.